Shalom, this is TV7's Israel at War update, and today we mark day 630 since the Islamist Hamas and its terror affiliates conducted their heinous crimes against the communities of southern Israel, murdering, of course, some 1,200, mostly civilians, wounding over 4,800 others, and kidnapping over 250 people, including elderly men, women, children, and infants. 50 of them remain in Hamas captivity to date. And to deliberate the latest vis-a-vis the Gaza Strip, as well as Lebanon, Syria, Iran, Yemen, the Horn of Africa, where there are ongoing implications to Iran's defeat and the various connections to the various warring locations on the eastern coast of this continent. Let's first introduce our experts for today, to include our TV7 editor-at-large, Mr. Amir Oren. Next to him, Colonel in Reserve Reuven Ben Shalom, who is a cross-cultural strategist, as well as a fellow at the Institute for Counterterrorism at Reichman University. And last but not least is Ms. Zineb Riboua, who is the manager of the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East at Hudson Institute, where she's also a research fellow. It's great to see all three of you. And Mr. Owen, I'd like to start with you on the Gazan portfolio. Give us a little bit of an understanding of the intensity of fighting. Currently, there are 4 divisions operating there, but what are they actually doing?
So they are at least ostensibly, nominally involved in operations in order to defeat Hamas and take down its governmental and military structures. This has been to a large extent achieved, but Hamas went to ground and underground and is conducting rear-grade operations, guerrilla type, trying to strike at the Israeli forces in order to inflict casualties and obviously cause a lot of grief in the Israeli civilian population. Now, the Israeli military is obviously obeying orders from the political echelon. And behind the scenes, there are negotiations either regarding the so-called Witkoff outline, which would be an interim deal releasing half of the hostages who are alive, that is 10 out of 20, and perhaps half of the bodies, 15 out of the 30, and then wait for 60 days and then go on, or perhaps an all-inclusive deal. The all-inclusive deal would probably be tied with a broader Middle East rearrangement, having Saudi Arabia or Syria or Lebanon and others join the Abraham Accords. But this is apparently still in the making, and there are domestic repercussions already. Some of the ministers in Netanyahu's government have already vehemently opposed the Palestinian part of it, because there would be some horizon for a Palestinian state. This is anathema to these ministers and their parties, so it remains to be seen.
Well, according to a poll that was released by the Center for the Jerusalem Center for Foreign Affairs and Security, published early this morning, it indicates that 66% of Israelis do reject the premise of the establishment of a Palestinian state within the framework of the 1967 lines, of course, post-October 7th, and the majority of Israelis are not necessarily very eager to see some sort of broader framework currently implemented. I think it seems that there is a certain process that needs to be established by the Israeli side as well as the other side, to say the least, in order to reach some sort of framework that would make any type of a future resolution a reality. But it's too early to see something like this. Colonel Ben Shalom, uh, I'd like to hear your take on that. Naturally, when we're talking about Hamas, it's still defiantly rejecting any type of outline that was offered to it that would save their skin, but meanwhile also reject their aspirations to maintain control over the Palestinian territory.
Well, perhaps the fact that the war is so long and also that we are right now in the aftermath of the campaign against Iran, then Hamas will recalculate. And that's the big question now. How do they view their position? What do they think, if at all, there are ramifications for what we saw in Iran? Because notice that we're fighting this guerrilla warfare in our backyard and having a tough time. Yet when we're faced with this huge strategic challenge with historic, magnitude, we're able to defeat them, bring them down to their knees in a way, and that raises a big question. But certainly these arenas are tied. So Hamas must be asking themselves now what it means. The issue now with the Palestinian state, or like you said, the horizon or the prospects of a Palestinian state is very interesting, because just uttering those words for this specific government it's impossible. It's something that it's against the fundamental things that they believe in. Yet for the international community and the Americans and the Palestinians, all you need is uttering a few words with the possibility, the vague future possibility of perhaps someday reaching some kind of resolution. And that's problematic. So there's no way of knowing where we are right now. I think these are the days where these calculations are being made. You mentioned the Israeli population. I'm not sure that polls dictate what this government will do. I mean, sometimes it's good to know maybe that a majority feels this way or that, but I don't think that's the main calculation. And one more point I'll say, that after October 7th, the problem for the Israeli population is not only realistically understanding threats, but also thinking this is the prize that they're going to get, that ultimately, historically, the Palestinians will know that Hamas gave them statehood by launching a massacre. So that is also one of the things to consider.
That is a significant factor in the calculus, not only of Israel's leadership, but also the people at large, and whoever does offer something like this to the Palestinians after such a campaign will no longer have a place in Israeli politics. That is something that will never go across, particularly at the right of center population in Israel, which happens to be the largest segment of Israeli society to date. But nonetheless, Ms. Riboua, how does the Arab world look at this right now, particularly in the aftermath of the resounding defeat of the Islamic Republic of Iran, which was naturally brought about by Israel, with the final nail being hammered down by Operation Midnight Hammer?
Thank you. So I think that from the Arab world perspective, I think they're still dealing with they're still processing what actually happened to Iran, because the repercussions are not just about Hamas and Hezbollah, but also about Yemen, the Houthis, because the Houthis were blocked in the Red Sea, which is a great problem for the Egyptians, for the Saudis and others. Iran is also very active in places like Sudan. It's also trying to extend in Niger. And all these places are places where the Arab countries are actually actively competing for influence. So I think that there is a lot of an evaluation, I would say, of the regional balance has been placed now with the operations. But I say that there's also a problem in terms of great power competition, because the Chinese have been pushing Iran as one of their friends and partners, and they have been taking Iran around the Gulf, especially to Saudi Arabia, and basically making the pitch that Iran is a partner that can be dealt with, as long as there's some sort of containment of its activities. Of course, this is something that the Arab world really does not want, and it was really just a hard pill to swallow. But I think that that because of these operations, the Chinese are being also reevaluated. There's now a bigger sense that the United States and the backing of the United States is here to stay, and I think that these things are being read that way. So even when it comes to Hamas, Gaza, and other things, I think for now there is a clear sign that that everything will go based on U.S. interests and Israeli interests. And I think this is something that that everyone understands. And I would like to add just one thing. I think that people are, especially in the Arab world, as what I read, the commentaries, they're overwhelmingly positive because an Israel that can defend itself against its enemies is actually an Israel that is very attractive for Arab countries that still struggle with terrorism, having some sort of intelligence sharing as type of partnerships when there is a normalization. These things are very attractive. And so I think that I don't know if you saw, but right after the attacks and the campaign, Witkoff and others said that the Abraham Accords are going to expand, and I think this is something in the Arab world people are looking at.
Absolutely. Well, at the same time, we also need to take into account that Iran's proxies are proactively trying to rehabilitate themselves, irrespective of what just happened in Iran. And that is something that Israel is also taking into account and is not just sitting idly by and not confronting. Mr. Owen, when we're talking about Lebanon in particular, we saw earlier today a very significant strike against the subterranean infrastructure belonging to Hezbollah. Tell us more about that.
I will, but let me just for a second take issue with your premise that having an horizon for the Palestinian state would be rewarding an aggression by Hamas. 5 years ago, when President Trump came out with his vision for peace and prosperity, including a Palestinian state in 4 years under certain conditions, both Netanyahu and his major rival at the time, Benny Gantz, were for it. And therefore, if Netanyahu now adopts a similar approach, he will say that the next elections in Israel could serve as a referendum on it. Also, the ancient maxim that to the winner go the spoils has not been followed in the Middle East in recent years. After Sadat attacked Israel, he got what he wanted. 4 years later, Israel withdrawing from the Sinai. And after Saddam Hussein launched his missiles at Israel, the Madrid conference was imposed on the Shamir government. And there are other such examples. Now, as for Lebanon, there were two incidents not too far from the Israeli border. One in the village of Hula, where a Hezbollah operative was already killed a few days ago, but in his home, it turned out that Hezbollah intended to rehabilitate its infrastructure. The Israeli Defense Forces attacked it and destroyed it. And in the Beaufort Ridge, overlooking the Upper Galilee region of Israel, the Israeli Air Force again detected some movements by Hezbollah. They are trying to rehabilitate their positions, perhaps not immediately fire at Israel, but prepare the ground for it. And the IAF struck it and completely, as is now the custom to say, obliterated it.
Well, when we're talking about Sadat or Israel relinquishing the Sinai Peninsula to Egypt, that happened 4 years after the war of 1973. It didn't happen immediately after as part of a resolution to the conflict. And the same with Saddam Hussein. I mean, that didn't happen immediately thereafter. So there was a brewing period for the leadership in Jerusalem to sell one peace treaty or another in order to reach a certain arrangement that would be more viable and not immediately be interpreted as a gift to those committing the atrocities. But nonetheless, whoever does pursue something like this, as I mentioned, I don't think that they would survive the referendum, quote unquote, as you mentioned, in a political election. But Colonel Ben Shalom, I'd like to ask you also about Lebanon. To what degree is this currently stable, or are we seeing Hezbollah trying to rear its head once more to try and somehow indicate to the Iranians that they're still a relevant component to their axis of evil?
Look, we brought Hezbollah down. Now, certainly they're not gone, and I would not say stable, but we brought them down so significantly that during the war with Iran, Iran lost one of its main strategic pillars. Hezbollah should have snapped into action at that time, and instead they said, no, we're out, because they are so down. And I keep saying that these are really potential moments for Lebanon to finally get out of the grip of Iran and Hezbollah. But still, they're not resting and they're rebuilding. But it's important to understand especially after this campaign in Iran now, that Israel is different, our strategy is different, our mindset is different, the Israeli psyche is different when it goes to security after October 7th. And it's about time that everyone, our partners and our enemies alike in the region, understand this. And I don't want to get into the realm of bragging and being aggressive after this successful campaign in Iran. I just really believe it's important to understand that we're not going to let these threats emerge anymore. And for many years, when we said Iran will not acquire a nuclear weapon, they're not. We're not going to enable it. Now, too, we say Hezbollah is not going to regain the force that they have. They're not going to be back on the border. They will not be able to turn on their plans that they had ready, prepared. Just unfortunately for them, Hamas launched it first. It's not going to happen anymore. And you can have agreements, arrangements, understandings, relative quiet for a couple of weeks, but every time something emerges, we're going to pound on it. So the mechanism understand, the Americans understand, our partners, the Palestinians, Hezbollah understands. The question is, how soon will they realize that they have to change course? And I hope it doesn't have to go with another round of violence.
Well, haven't you heard Colonel Ben Shalom? I mean, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has already declared that Hamas is victorious, Hezbollah is victorious. Now they too in Iran are victorious. So maybe their interpretation of victory is very different than ours.
That's a tradition in the Middle East, and that tradition will never fail.
Indeed. Well, it fails miserably every time. So we will let them continue to pursue those type of victories over and over again and expect different results. I think Einstein was pretty blunt about his determination of those type of individuals. But nonetheless, Ms. Zinab, I'd like to ask you, since we're still studying, of course, the outcome of the war with Iran and the implications that are rooted out of this campaign, one of those places is Sudan. As you mentioned, of course, different locations on the western coast, or the eastern coast, rather, of Africa, where Iran is adamantly supportive of Abdel Fattah al-Burhan against, of course, Hamidi, who is backed by the United Arab Emirates. And we're seeing this vigorous conflict potentially entering in a new stage in which the Iranians don't have the logistical capacity any longer to sustain its various supportive efforts for the various actors in Africa and elsewhere. What are we to expect as a result of this reality?
Yeah, so I think that I wrote a paper for on the campaign and really on the implications for Iran. And I think that one of the biggest implications, apart from Iran losing its missiles, its launchers, and a lot of its own facilities, and especially its scientists and its commanders, who play a big role given the centralization of the Islamic Republic. and the fact that it is not a flexible organization. I think losing that is definitely going to cripple them, operationally speaking and tactically speaking. But that being said, because the Islamic Republic is an ideological regime, it is a revolutionary one. They do need to sustain proxies. And so you will not see them having military operations, for example, sending drones, but you see them doing much more in terms of seminaries, in terms of sending the clerics, in terms of recruiting. For example, the fact that Khamenei declared victory. Of course, this is absolutely ludicrous and absurd. But for him, the revolution must continue, and the fact that the revolution stayed intact and that it can continue is a victory in itself for them. And so, of course, I think this is something to monitor really, that we will see, all these cultural attaches of Iran doubling down and having much more activities than they've been doing before. It's very dangerous because this is how the Islamic Republic has been able, for the last 4 decades, build itself and brand itself slowly but steadily to the point where the Russians and the Chinese see them as a partner in this anti-Western axis. So I think this is how I see it so far.
Indeed. Well, the Iranians do excel at asymmetric warfare. That is something that we do need to take into account. They are employing crime syndicates, smuggling rings, and many other types of criminal activities that they are in concert with to really foment instability in many regions of the world. But it does seem, and I completely agree with you, Zineb, when we're talking about the Iranians, they're going to pursue any type of activity that they can maintain the plausible deniability, quote unquote, right, which they're so comfortable in doing. But we're drawing near to the end of the program, and I'd like to give each of you the opportunity to have some insight that you would like to focus on. 1 minute and 20 seconds, each of you. Mr. Owen, we'll start with you.
Defense Minister Israel Katz confirmed or boasted, would be more like it last night, that Israel was going to eliminate Khamenei had it been operationally opportune. It wasn't. He managed to hide away, but the decision has been made, and the finger was on the trigger. Whether it was wise to say it or not is now irrelevant. But Khamenei will obviously calculate his next moves, knowing full well that he's in the crosshairs. So it could be either good or bad for the next moves of the Iranians, but one should remember this factor.
Colonel Ben Shalom.
I would like to put emphasis on the potential here now of regional cooperation. And perhaps after such a resounding success, we could make the mistake of thinking that now we can do it alone. Even going back to the biblical saying, a nation that dwells alone. On the contrary, the success here proved the importance of international and regional cooperation. And moving forward, this strength, the strength that we demonstrated, shows what amazing things we can do with our partners, mainly Jordan, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia. There's huge potential. And a bit contrary to before, also with the Palestinians.
And of course, it has already been reported that during the entirety of the campaign, the United States was instrumental in air refueling. So the strategic backbone of the State of Israel and many of its activities globally, or regionally rather, against common adversaries, still requires the United States to be at the forefront of many of those activities. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's on the forefront of those activities, but rather it still provides that backing, both in international fora as well as logistically, in order to make those things possible alongside other allies, Germany, France, Britain, and others that have also been instrumental here. Ms. Ribois?
Right.
Well, I think that it's important now to actually focus on the next fronts. I think Iran sees, for example, Iraq as a front that it can develop after losing Hezbollah and the Houthis struggling because they don't receive enough weapons and not on time. Iran is also looking at other fronts in Africa, and I think that, of course, as my colleague said about the more regional cooperation, this is absolutely key. I think that, of course, Israel can do a lot alone, but I think having that sort of coalition, which Bibi actually talked about last year when he came to DC, sort of a coalition of the Abraham Accords countries, this would be critical. But also, as I mentioned, yeah, I think it's important to keep in mind the next fronts for Iran, especially Iraq, which is its neighbor.
Thank you, Ms. Riboua. I will also add to all of this. I think that Western civilization at large, and the United States in particular, have forgot what victory tastes like, and it's time for them to embrace. They have achieved a great victory here against the Islamic Republic of Iran, have brought them to their knees, particularly in this Operation Rising Lion, and there's times for joy and times for less so, but this is absolutely a time for joy where, praise God, Israel and the United States have managed to maintain the upper hand and attain victory in this battle. The war is still raging, and we need also to keep that in mind. But this is all the time we have for today. I'd like to thank Ms. Riboua, Colonel Ben Shalom, and Mr. Oren for all of your insights today. I'd like to thank all of you at home as well. Until our next edition from here in Jerusalem. Shalom.
My name is Doron Gavish, and my background, 30 years of serving in the Israeli Air Force. My last job, I was the commander of the Israeli Air and Missile Defense during the introduction of the Iron Dome to the defense of Israel. All of this allows me really to be part of the team here in TV7. It is super important to have such a platform. We talk about the global situation, we talk about Israel, and those different angles which are relevant to the discussion.
For more of TV7's productions and editorials, we invite you to visit our website at TV7israelnews.com.